Hello, my friends. It is Monday, March 3rd, 2025, and I think I have 9 stories for you. It really depends on how you dissect the stories because some kind of flow into another. So let's start here with Marco Rubio talking about coining the term Ukrainesplaining. Okay, let's hear what he has to say.
Can we get them to a table to negotiate? That's our goal. Don't do anything to disrupt that. And that's what Zelensky did, unfortunately, is he found every opportunity to try to Ukraine-splain on every issue. Then he confronts
not every opportunity. J.D. Vance started pushing back, and then he was answering him by saying, what diplomatic? He didn't push and push and push and push. This was one thing where Vance didn't need to upset the apple cart, but he did.
Vice president, when the vice president says, the goal here is diplomacy, he immediately jumps in and challenges the vice president. Well, what kind of diplomacy? Well, so we all understand, okay, that Putin is not going to be an easy negotiator.
Okay, so he uses the term Ukraine-splaining here, and well, there's a reason that Zelensky's a little hesitant, and I'll show you that in just a moment. Okay. Michael McFall says Rubio has a long history of stating clear positions on the record regarding Putin and his imperial autocratic ways. He really does. I was excited when Rubio was picked. There's no way he changed his mind in the last 4 weeks, but trying to be loyal to this administration, he has kind of changed his tune, and that's very unfortunate. I voted for Rubio back in 2016 over Trump in the primary because I thought Rubio was the better candidate, but he's not really showing me that he's sticking to this. In fact, in this last video that I just posted, how Ambassador Bolton was just scorching what happened to Trump. This is the very last video I posted earlier today. Bolton's taking him to task as well. Like, Rubio knows better. He knows better about that Russia is supporting Cuba, which Rubio has strong feelings about. Okay, Ben Hodges says people around the President of the United States don't understand the nature of war or why men fight. Russia is in trouble. If Europe can deliver its industrial potential, which dwarfs Russia, Ukraine wins. Europe will have done it despite us, resulting in loss of U.S. influence to our great regret. I think that's probably fair. Now, I see things like this. Zelensky once again rejects multiple calls for immediate ceasefire between Russia and Ukraine. And Doug McGregor answers, what's wrong with this man? Well, nothing's wrong with this man. It's actually a very rational act to reject multiple calls for immediate ceasefire, because what happens with previous ceasefires? Here's a little on how Russian ceasefires work. On December 9th, 2019, Ukraine, France, Germany, and Russia signed a ceasefire agreement in Paris, which Russia broke immediately. Moscow only used the deal as a delay tactic, restricting Ukraine's defenses, only to launch one of the largest assaults of the war on February 18th, 2020. So how long was that between when the deal was struck and when Putin violated it? Here's December 9th, 2019, February 18th, 2020, that's 71 days. 71 days. So that should be the kind of thing that we say here. We should be saying 71 days or X number of days. This is how long it takes for Putin to violate his agreements. Okay. Now, next big story. The allies with Ukraine in the vanguard met in London to decide what to do about aggression. Okay, and they did. And they got together and they, came away from this looking like they're going to be doing something differently now because they're kind of getting the memo. It looks like they're going to. Even Ireland is, and I'll show you that in a moment. The UK is ready to close the sky over Ukraine and ensure a peace deal, Sky News reports. Prime Minister Starmer stated that the UK is prepared to provide not just troops, but also aviation to monitor the peacekeeping agreement between Ukraine and Russia. He also mentioned that several European countries are urgently preparing a peacekeeping mission. So he's not alone. Even Ireland. Ireland is rethinking its neutrality. This is a big shift in their defense policy. Now, Ireland really is kind of in a protected bubble. It's kind of like where Switzerland is. And, Finland and Sweden have historically tried to hold on to this neutrality, not joining NATO, and they joined NATO since the war began. Ireland, look at this. Dublin is moving to ease defense rules to boost support for Ukraine, potentially ditching the triple lock system that requires UN, government, and parliament approval for troop deployments, according to Bloomberg. Well, why does that matter? Ireland's long kept a neutral stance. Like, if Switzerland does, you'll know, like, the game's on. on. It's pretty interesting to see how things have shifted here. Now, Che Bowes, who's also Irish and who also is always on RT talking up Russian propaganda, said, imagine Russia and China trained and armed a 250,000 man army in Mexico on the U.S. border and used that army to and bomb Americans living there, and then said that they would be assisting Mexico to take back Texas by giving them tanks and missiles and billions. What would the U.S. do? Huh. I mean, that kind of describes Russia, not Ukraine. Like, Russia's the one that went over the border. Ukraine wasn't, like, I know what he's trying to say here, but Ukraine wasn't threatening the Russian border. Like, I'm going to go over your border and take your stuff and break things. It was Russia doing that. So it's kind of a bad analogy, Che. You really need to work harder at this. Okay, Trump's team wants Zelensky out. Next big story. Will Ukraine be forced into a deal? So some of Trump's advisors are pushing for Zelensky's resignation to be part of a future peace deal with Russia. Trump himself is reportedly less aggressive than some of his advisors. I'm not sure which advisors are doing that. I hope it's not Rubio. I would hope it's not Waltz, although Waltz has been disappointing me today when I saw an interview on Fox this morning. Trump himself is reportedly less aggressive, but the pressure is mounting. Zelensky hits back, quote, removing me will be harder than blocking me from elections, unquote. France and the UK are offering Trump a list of security guarantors for Ukraine and are ready to send peacekeepers. Now, when we're talking about removing Zelensky, this just came out recently. A presidential voting intention, Zelensky, 44%. Now, he's not everybody's cup of tea, but when you compare it to Zelensky at 21 or Poroshenko at 10 or whoever else all the way down in the single digits, I don't see Zelensky going anywhere. And you just made it. So if what Trump did just backfired so exquisitely that you just strengthened Zelensky's hand from that Oval Office meeting because of the shabby way that he was treated. Okay, next, who bears most responsibility for the Oval Office argument? Now, this was a CNN poll. However, I don't know. So Donald Trump would be 50%, J.D. Vance 42%, and then 4 for all equally and 4 for Zelensky. I know that if this was a Fox News poll, and Fox News has been really disappointing with the narrative that they're pushing right now. It's like a very MAGA-leaning narrative, which is they have to thread a needle carefully because they're going to isolate all the conservative base. Okay, it'll probably rise to maybe 40%, 30%, but then the rest of it is going to be higher on Donald Trump and Vance. I don't know how much it's going to be, but wow. Okay, so at any rate, who's responsible? I was watching Jake Bro, and he said this I thought was pretty funny yesterday. Let's listen.
NATO Secretary General calls for Zelensky to restore the relationship with Trump following the Oval Office clash. And it's possible. Donald Trump does this all the time with people. He attacks them and then becomes friends with them again. So Zelensky could repair this.
Yes, and this is how Trump operates. He says one thing here, and then he says another thing over there that's diametrically opposed. You would think, like, if you had any consistency, you wouldn't do that. But he doesn't really have consistency. And so if you're doing what he wants you to do, you're the best thing ever. If you're not doing that, you're the worst dictator ever. And okay, let's just finish with what Jake was thinking.
I mean, maybe if Zelensky puts out a tweet saying that Donald Trump deserves a Nobel Peace Prize and he's the most handsome man who ever lived, then yes, maybe we could restore this relationship, but
I just thought that was funny and wanted to share it. Okay, Ukraine does not need to make concessions now. What was the White House debacle about then? Well, so Trump put this out. The only president who gave none of Ukraine's land to Putin's Russia is President Donald J. Trump. Remember, So last week he was a dictator and you just had the office debacle, and then he wasn't. And then you had the Oval Office debacle, and then you put out this, like, he's all over the map. So it's weirdly comforting in a bizarre and perverse way. Okay. Here is Steve Rosenberg from the BBC talking about how Russian newspapers are looking at what has happened. So let's listen to a little of this.
Last Friday's drama in the White House dominates today's Russian papers. And you won't be surprised to learn that there is gloating galore at how President Zelensky was treated and so publicly berated. A university professor tells Moskovsky Komsomolets Russia cannot conceal its malicious pleasure. Komsomolskaya Pravda writes that for several years, important men with fat wallets persuaded Zelensky that the sun revolved around him, and now they're sticking his head in the toilet. But after the scandal in the Oval Office, what next? Russian MP Vyacheslav Nikonov tells the paper that Europe may talk big about giving Ukraine money and weapons, but they don't have that much money or produce weapons, and the Americans can turn the taps off and stop supplying Ukraine with arms. The Western system is crashing like a house of cards. Political scientist Dmitry Drobnitsky concludes Trump's position is, if you want to fight Russia, then do it yourselves.
Okay, so the Russians are very happy about what they saw here. No doubt they're happy with it. It really revolves around, what is Europe going to do? Are they going to step up? At least one European leader is working as hard as he can to prevent anything from moving forward. This is the last big story, and this is Hungary. Hungary has blocked EU security guarantees for Ukraine. The EU just needs to play hardball, because what Hungary generally does is they block things until they get certain concessions. It's blackmail, and then they release it. So he's doing the same thing. So, if I could give advice to the EU, just, fight back the same way. Just hardball back with Hungary. Okay, you're not getting anything either. And work from there. All right, my friends, that's all that I have. If you are on, if you listen to this on podcast, I'm on Spotify, or if you're interested in listening to this in podcast, and you can listen to everything. Just like I hope that if you're in the car, you don't have it on YouTube, you put it on like a podcast and listen to it that way. Thank you for your time. Thank you for the likes, the shares, the subscribes. Thank you for being the kind of person that cares about Ukraine.